All right, so welcome to another one of my presentations. Again, these presentations are usually designed for the retirement community that I work at. Each month we have a different theme, and I go ahead and research something based on that theme, and we talk about it and have a little fun. We learn a lot. We go into a lot of different subjects, very, very many different subjects. So you're going to be able to see many different presentations posted over the next few months, kind of working backwards. So this one is from our February 2020 theme of Express Love. So I already talked about half of this presentation last week, but this is the half of the presentation where we talk about corporations and the money that they give out. So the amount of money that they donate, where do their donations go to, and just some interesting stuff, because sometimes, even though you may be a consumer of some of these big corporations' products, you may not know that some of the money from the revenues that you spend is going towards certain nonprofit organizations. So we're going to start with Gilead. Gilead is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the entire world. So you most likely had some type of drug in your life that was produced by Gilead. They gave the most amount of money of any large corporation in the United States. That amount was $388 million, and it was 2.9% of their profits, which is a pretty high margin, as you'll see when we go through a lot of these companies. So they donated a lot of their money to nonprofits that provide medicine to places in need, that send doctors and medical workers to more poverty-stricken areas and lesser developed countries. They also provide preventative medicinal education, so education to areas where people could use that education to prevent themselves from getting certain diseases, and they support the communities in which their labs and employees live. So they have labs in over 35 different countries, and they have different grant programs in those communities to help benefit and support those communities. And some of those grant programs are not even medically related. They just try to improve the communities because their employees live there. So Gilead is also one of the leaders right now in drugs that are developed to treat coronavirus. So they have a drug kind of behind the scenes that supposedly is pretty positive, but in the United States it takes a long time for those drugs to get approved. However, in China, the informational property has already been stolen about this drug, and they're in a big lawsuit against a Chinese pharmaceutical company that has stolen their intellectual property. And they're also in a legal battle over withholding HIV drugs for profit. So supposedly they did that for 7 years. So, it's great that they donate $388 million, 2.9% of their profits, and they, boast about that highly. And a lot of times it's the nonprofit funding and donations from these large corporations are designed to help offset some of their negative press. The second biggest donator in the United States is Wells Fargo and Company, so that kind of makes sense. They also obviously had a very public negative press outfalling with all of their scandals with their bankers. But they gave $287 million in cash, and that is about 1% of their profit. So this doesn't go by percent, this goes by total amount. So 287 is the second most given by a company, but 1% of their profits is pretty low. Wells Fargo donates to more than 14,000 nonprofits, and employees have volunteered over 2 million hours. The company's charitable efforts are highlighted by $28 million to veterans and military service members, and $45 million in down payment assistance and other home buying resources through NeighborWorks. Also over $10 million to the American Red Cross. So again, $287 million, but also a company that we know has been kind of marred in scandal. Third company, gave the third most money, was Goldman Sachs. So $280 million, 2.5% of their profits. So again, we're talking about another Goldman Sachs, another company that's been linked to a lot of corruption. So you can see kind of definitely a pattern here of companies that make a lot of money but also have bad press are giving out a lot of the most non-profit money. So the charitable missions for Goldman Sachs include 10,000 Women, which provides education, funding, and other resources to women entrepreneurs, and 10,000 Small Businesses, which invests money and resources in people running small businesses. The 10,000 Small Businesses is actually a free certification program. It's like a 6-month educational program that you get a certificate from Goldman Sachs, and it's free in the sense that business owners can apply for it, and they give out so many of these basically tuition-free courses. So, but they're intense courses. Like you have to actually travel to a certain city and do a residency and everything. So it's pretty intense, and the certificate itself does mean a lot in the business world. Google gave the fourth most amount of cash at $255 million to charity. So Google maybe not have nearly as much of the scandals that we know of, but they gave $255 million in cash, which is actually still less than 1% of their overall earnings, so 0.9%. They announced that they plan to give $1 billion in grants and contribute more than 1 million volunteer hours over the next 5-year period. So Google has a lot of different ways in which they divvy up their money. I know that they have their medical subsidiary Verily and things like that that they're able to get a lot to their nonprofits. The next one we have is JP Morgan. So JP Morgan, obviously, big bank, Chase Bank, JP Morgan Chase. So you may have a Chase credit card sitting in your wallet right now, and that they gave the most, the fifth most amount of money, $250 million, and that was actually 0.7% of their revenue. So they're the lowest by percentage, I believe, on this list. So they did announce that they are boosting philanthropic efforts by 40% over the next 5 years. So hopefully we'll see something come of that. And their charities focus on economic revitalization in underserved neighborhoods, as well as increasing support for entrepreneurs of color. Johnson & Johnson was the next company, and they gave slightly over $200 million in charities. So Johnson & Johnson gave out $227 million, so just slightly below that. But they also give out a considerable amount of products, so millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of their product they give out as charity. Johnson & Johnson actually has, besides their product lines that you may be familiar with as far as shampoos and health and beauty products, but they have pharmacies as well. Johnson & Johnson is an extremely large company, and right now they are one of the companies on the forefront of creating a coronavirus vaccine. So just an interesting kind of behind the scenes fact there. We're going to start talking about some just interesting nonprofits now, not just so much the list of the huge corporations, but just some interesting nonprofits. ProConorg is a free public service that is entirely donor supported. Nonprofit rating is the highest. It's a platinum rating. That's by GuideStar. And it's also been called a top-rated nonprofit by many other rating agencies. Even the Library of Congress has acknowledged that ProCon.org has materials of historical importance to the Congress and the American people. So it's a website, basically, that you can go on and see almost any controversial subject, and you can see the pros and the cons. And they're really, really good at showing unbiased opinions and unbiased takes on those really controversial issues. So they serve more than 20 million people each year, and that includes being contract with over 11,000 schools. So they help kids in many schools learn about all the different sides to an issue, whether it's gun rights or saying prayer in school or anything like that. It's really interesting to just pick a subject and read on it on procon.org. LifeStraw is a pretty cool product. So the LifeStraw is this kind of tubular device where you can just stick it in water, any water, even just swamp water, suck it all up, and then it will filter out everything that's bad, and you can drink it. So it's kind of a survival gear type of product. But every purchase of a portable water filter, of a LifeStraw portable water filter, gives a child in a developing country safe drinking water for 1 school year. So it's pretty awesome that they're just a nonprofit, and it's a pretty good product, but you're also helping people get safe drinking water, which is one of the world's biggest problems. Darden Restaurants has a great charity program. So Darden Restaurants includes Olive Garden, Red Lobster, Seasons 52. A huge amount of restaurants are in their coalition. And each day, across every single one of those restaurants, they collect surplus foods that haven't been served to their guests, and instead of discarding them, they take them to donation to local nonprofit partners. So it's pretty cool. At the end of every night or at the end of every afternoon, whenever they close, they take all that food to local food banks and shelters and help people who are hungry, which is also a big problem. Since its inception, more than 96 million meals have been donated through the Harvest Program, so that's pretty cool. Chickfila. So Chickfila has kind of a checkered past as far as its charity goes. There were some people who had a little bit of an issue with the fact that they gave a significant amount of their charitable donations went towards homosexuality reorientation camps, where they use very intensive physical means to try and change someone's sexuality. And one of the camps that they had been found to be giving money to had a suicide rate of above 40%. So people had a pretty significant issue with that a few years ago. Chick-fil-A had always said that this is part of their belief system. They're a very religious backed company. This is why they're not open on Sundays, and so they argued it that way. And actually, when they argued it that way, they actually ended up making more money rather than it hurting them. They've been they were the fastest growing fast food restaurant chain last year. So just wanted to mention, interestingly, they announced in January that they were going to be reorienting their charitable efforts, and that $9 million would be set aside for promoting youth education, combating youth homelessness, and fighting hunger. So they're starting to change the narrative a little bit. They're not standing as strongly on those anti-homosexuality camps and things like that, but they didn't say that they weren't going to give money to those. They just mentioned a new kind of initiative. So just kind of the way that they're promoting it, and hopefully we'll see what who they give to at the end of this year. Ford has a really good program in which they donated over $110 million last year, and their employees volunteered over 50,000 hours. So most of all of this charitable efforts went to first responders. So they are very, very concerned about first responders. Home Depot gave $250 million to veterans' causes in the last 5 years. So Home Depot gives a lot of money to veterans' causes because over 35% of their employees are veterans. And as well, they give a lot of money to disaster relief areas. And obviously that also helps them because when you're in a disaster, oftentimes you have to rebuild. So people use the money that was donated to them to go buy things from Home Depot. But still, either way, they give a huge amount of money to both veterans and disaster relief. Equity Forward is a pretty interesting informational site where you can find information on all of the different ways in which companies have spent their nonprofit money. So, for example, 15 big name companies boast that they have a commitment to gender equality, yet each one of these companies has contributed significant sums of money to support lawmakers who sponsored oppressive anti-abortion legislation. So, depending on your thought process and your viewpoint on each subject, you can go into Equity Forward. It's a website, and learn more about what your favorite consumer companies, whether it's Pepsi versus Coke or Ford versus Toyota and things like that, who they're giving their money to as far as lawmakers and what those lawmakers are doing with that money. So that is the conclusion of this presentation. Hopefully found some stuff that was interesting to you. And we'll have another great one next week. We're going to keep putting them up, going to get a lot of content out there, and we'll see how it goes. Thanks everybody for joining me.